ruling that a Maryland man mistakenly deported to El Salvador does not have to be returned to the United States.
Remember, this is a person that went through the American justice system and got a withholding, which has a higher standard, a higher burden, a higher standard to clear in an effort to get a withholding of removal from this state, from this nation state. Bernie Sanders, U.S. under Trump faces unprecedented level of danger. I'm going to skip that. Donald Trump also endorsed sending American citizens to the El Salvador prison. Also, fake Fapper has no leg to stand on here. The whole MSM waited too long to go after Biden's age.
Get better. So there is an opportunity every time he goes out, every time Joe Biden goes out.
Oof. Age is like a broken bone. Age is not like a broken bone. It doesn't get better. Oof. Damn, I'm kind of mad. That's a banger line. I'm mad I didn't think of it first. Like, I mean, I've been making this same exact joke for a while, but that's like a way more poetic way to put it. You know? Damn, when they want to be, they can actually... When they want to be, the media can actually do their job, and it's annoying.
It's so disconcerting that I've seen it happen in like a week. You know, like overnight. I'm just like, what the what have you been doing this entire time?
It's very, very frustrating that they didn't do this before, and only now are they attempting to do it. And it's like, where was this energy in 2020, man? Yep. Far too late. Yes, I saw the new SCOTUS ruling. Don't worry, I'm gonna get to it. Okay. Tommy Vitor says, Biden burned so much moral and political capital by supporting every single thing Netanyahu did, and now Bibi's just sitting there grinning ear to ear as Trump shits all over him. The hug Bibi strategy was one of the dumbest ideas ever spit out by a White House. Wait, Trump is not shitting all over him. Wait, what? Trump is literally eating Benjamin Netanyahu's shit. I wish he was shitting all over him. Oh, shitting on Biden. Oh, I misunderstood. Okay. Yeah, Trump is shitting on Biden, and he's smiling, grinning ear to ear. Yeah, Biden was a fool. A decrepit old monster. All right. We're moving on to immigration, because that is also an environment where the Trump administration is doing a lot. Okay, sorry, I was looking at something.
Salvador, the president there, said he would be willing to take American citizens in the federal prison population. Is that one of the ideas you're going to be discussing?
Well, I love that. If we could take some of our 20-time wise guys that push people into subways and that hit people over the back of the head and that purposely run people over in cars, if he would take them, I'd be honored to give them. I don't know what the law says on that, but I can't imagine the law would say anything different. If they can house these horrible criminals for a lot less money than it costs us, I'm all for it. But I'd only do according to the law. But I have suggested that, why should it stop just at people that cross the border illegally? We have some horrible criminals, American grown and born, and if we have somebody that bops an old woman over the head, if we have somebody that is in jail 20 times and goes back and shoots people all over the place and then has a bad judge or a bad prosecutor that do nothing about him, all they worry about is politics, they don't worry about that. I think if we could...
Yeah, notice how he's making this shit up? It's just completely made up. Yeah, what if a guy was just like assassinating people 10 times a day, and then a judge was like, I'm gay and woke. Are you undocumented? Well, I can't send you to prison, nor can I deport you. And then he came out of that situation, came out of that detainment, and then started assassinating 20 people a day. What if that happened? You wouldn't want to deport that guy. It's like, okay, what if a guy had a nuke? Like, what do you mean? What if he had superpowers? Like, what are you saying? So stupid.
Could get El Salvador or somebody, but to take them, I'd be very happy with it. But I have to say,
yeah, he wants to send Americans there too. Anyway, Maryland reacts as Supreme Court halts man's return from mistaken deportation. The U.S. Supreme Court allowed President Trump to enforce the Alien Enemies Act for rapid deportations for now, handing the White House a significant victory, and also undermining the American Constitution and any sort of power that the judiciary had. Ironically enough, the Supreme Court, the highest the highest form of the judiciary, not operating on the best interest of the separation of powers, has decided to basically allow the Trump administration to implement his Nazi shit, eroding precedent and
Scared.
I'm invoking the Alien Enemies Act of 1798 because we are being invaded and it's a war at this point, really. And Joe Biden, listen, Joe Biden, he did this. Was awful. Joe Biden did blah, blah, blah. Simplified SCOTUS. This is totally normal. Just give the deportees a court date in Texas, and I think we'll just let things happen. Pay no attention to dissenters. Okay, I don't like simplified SCOTUS. What the fuck is this? Yeah, Supreme Court allows Trump to enforce Alien Enemies Act for rapid deportations for now. This is a horrifying move. Obviously, it's probably the biggest thing that they did today, even in spite of all the tariffs. This is more significant than the tariffs and the economic hardships that they're going to cause. Straight up. This is the judiciary allowing for this administration to do Nazi shit. Remember what I told you? Like, the courts were seen as the only setback against this administration. We are now moving in the direction where the laws will be used against the people. Once you set the precedent, you then use the existing law. Now we move away from legality to the morality of the situation, because up until this moment, it was not legal. The Supreme Court has now made it legal. Before it was illegal and immoral. Now it is legal and immoral. Awful decision, but there's an extremely important caveat. SCOTUS says, but offers no way to require the government to do this, and we know this is largely toothless, that anyone subject to the law must get notice and time to file a habeas lawsuit. Innocents will be harmed. I mean, considering that they already caved to the administration on this, there's no reason that they will ever follow up with this. Yeah, next decision that comes down the line will be like, okay, I guess there is no reason. There is no notice in time to file a habeas lawsuit. Fuck it. Do you think the conservative justices understand the historical weight of their decisions in a case like this, or do you think they just don't give a... I think they don't give a... I think they understand it and like it, or they understand it and don't give a... Probably the first one, though. I think they understand the weight of the historical decisions that they're making, and they're just monsters, and they like it. They like that they're moving the nation in this direction. Yeah. Here.
At 6, the U.S. Supreme Court hands the Trump administration a temporary victory, ruling that a Maryland man mistakenly deported to El Salvador does not have to be returned to the United States.
Remember, this is a person that went through the American justice system and got a withholding, which has a higher standard, a higher burden, a higher standard to clear, in an effort to get a withholding of removal from this state, from this nation state. So when the Trump administration actually went out and removed him from this country and sent him directly to El Salvador, they violated the law. Not only did they violate the law, but they also admitted that they violated the law. They were like, oops, we up. And their defense, no, he's not an illegal immigrant. No. A withholding of for a removal is an important part of being able to get legal permanent residency. It is illegal for him to be removed from the country unless he's done something like heinous, but he had not, obviously. We're talking about him like not specifically being here as an illegal immigrant or whatever. I'm talking like straight up. He went through the asylum process and was on his pathway to getting a citizenship. He has a legal right to be here. They just grabbed him, deported him to El Salvador specifically, and used a confidential informant that basically lied about him being an MS-13 gang member that was later looked at by another judge who was like, yeah, this has no bones. Like, this is just a fucking made-up thing. And the reason why it was a made-up thing is because that CI... or not CI, but like they did a random Home Depot dragnet where one of the dudes there was like, oh, this guy's actually MS-13 in New York. He had never been in New York. And a second judge that overlooked that case realized that it was just a ridiculous accusation. And on top of that, all of the other evidence that they compiled in the process showed that he had reason to not be removed from this country. And yet, the Department of Homeland Security still black-bagged him and shipped him to El Salvador. His wife didn't know that he was shipped to El Salvador. They didn't know where he was until the Salvadoran government posted a Twitter video where his wife literally saw his neck tattoo and was like, oh my God, that's my fucking husband that was kidnapped. In that process, the administration itself recognized that they had fucked up by deporting this person, but then they, one, lied and said, nah, he's MS-13, which was a fucking lie, straight up lie. Then they doubled down and said, not only is he MS-13, which is a lie, but also on top of that, we can't bring him back, which is also a lie. The idea that the American government has never actually wrongly deported someone and then never brought them back is wrong. The American government has wrongly deported people in the past. The American government has also, in that process, when found to be in the wrong, has brought back those people that they have falsely deported. But they claim that this government that we're paying $6 million to warehouse these undocumented migrants and documented legal permanent residents and potentially even American citizens in the future, we have no power over them. We have no power over bringing them back into the United States of America. It's bullshit. It's completely made up.
Hello, everybody. I'm Denise Koch, and welcome to WJZ's All Local News at 6. The pause on the deportees' return comes just hours before the midnight deadline to bring Kilmar Abrego Garcia back to Maryland. WJZ investigator Mike Helgren stays on this story for us. He has more on the new order from the nation's highest court.
Earlier, Kilmar Abrego Garcia's wife spoke directly to President Trump, saying she hoped her children would be reunited with their father tonight. That will not happen. The Chief Justice himself issued the order, saying he wants more arguments in the case. A victory for the Trump administration, a 3-sentence order from the Chief Justice of the U.S. Supreme Court, ruling the government does not have to bring Kilmar Abrego Garcia back to the United States tonight.
The Supreme Court overturned a lower court's decision to bring this person who was illegally sent to El Salvador back. The Supreme Court looked at that and said, nah, they can do it. This is a major, major precedent. It is a major violation of the power of the judiciary because the nation's highest court is completely on board with the administration.
Weeks after immigration officials admitted mistakenly deporting him from Maryland to a violent Salvadoran prison. It goes against lower court rulings.
We have judges that try and protect these people, but they didn't protect us when the people were being let in. But to get them out is never easy with these people.
He is an MS-13.
My understanding is that, yes, he shouldn't be deported, but specifically he shouldn't be deported to El Salvador because he would be in a lot of danger. Like if they deport him, they have to do it somewhere else, anywhere else. Dude, if you're from El Salvador and you get a withholding to be deported to El Salvador, that means don't deport this person. You understand that, right? Where else is the government supposed to deport someone from El Salvador to? That's not how that works. Like, are we just deporting people randomly to other countries? I mean, we have done that in the past, and it's a horrific thing that we did. And it's also hilarious because like that means there is a higher standard for withholding than a straightforward asylum seeker claim. Like there is a higher standard to maintain a withholding, to develop a decision on withholding rather than give like someone a straightforward asylum claim.
Gang member.
Attorney General Pam Bondi again called Abrego Garcia an MS-13 gang member despite the government presenting no evidence in court, and defended putting the prosecutor who argued the case in Maryland Friday on administrative leave.
Yeah, they fucking fired, or you know, they also reprimanded the attorney, the government prosecutor that admitted basically to the mistake that they had made.
He shouldn't have taken the case. He shouldn't have argued it if that's what he was going to do.
The case has drawn outrage, with Abrego Garcia's supporters rallying around him. A Maryland federal judge blasted the government, calling the mistaken deportation a grievous error and ruling there were no legal...
By the way, the reason why they made this grievous error is because there was no due process either. Like, no judge Like, even if they went to a fucking judge that is like incredibly reactionary, even the most right-wing judge probably would not have let this guy get deported. Maybe he would have let every other guy get deported, but not this dude. You see what I'm saying? Like, no matter how racist they are, this is a direct violation of a previous court ruling. There's too much evidence to suggest that this person should not be deported.
Legal grounds whatsoever for his arrest, detention, or removal. His detention appears wholly lawless. The Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals upheld that decision, writing, Abrego Garcia has no criminal history in this country or anywhere else and is a gainfully employed family man who lives a law-abiding and productive life. Maryland Congressman Glenn Ivey.
But it should send a message, I hope, to the Trump administration that you can't just go around grabbing people, and once you realize that you've made a mistake, don't double down on it.
The Solicitor General wrote in a successful appeal to the Supreme Court, the United States does not control the sovereign nation of El Salvador, nor can it compel
it didn't send that message to the Trump administration, because the Trump administration got the exact opposite message, because the Supreme Court is like, nah, you can do that.
El Salvador to follow a federal judge's bidding.
As a former prosecutor who's handled immigration cases, have you ever seen a case like this?
I don't think I've ever seen a scenario where the Department of Justice acknowledges it made a mistake.
Yeah, this is I believe this is the first time, as far as I understand. I was reading some immigration attorneys and like people that have successfully litigated matters like this. This is the first time where the administration recognizes they made a mistake and does not go back and return the wronged party to U.S. soil. Because, like, mistakes like this have happened, even with due process, of course. Like, even when someone goes through the court process and then they are found to be wrongfully deported from this country, even if they were initially deported, the government will go back and extract that person and bring that person back to U.S. soil. This has happened in immigration history in the United States of America. This is the first time where the government's like, yeah, we know he should not have been deported to El Salvador. It is literally illegal for us to deport him to El Salvador, and we're still not going to bring him back.
But then says there's nothing they can do to fix it. At a minimum, we should be able to get back a person who hasn't been proven guilty of anything, at least so far, that the government's alleged, so he can have his day in court.
The Chief Justice says lawyers haven't
not overturned yet. It's an administrative stay for more ruling time for the court. They can still allow him to come back or not. Everything I've read has said it's a stay, not an actual ruling on Garcia's case yet, I thought. Maybe I'm misunderstanding it. Like, oh, they're blocking the court order requiring his return in order to give more time to the courts in order to give
until tomorrow at 5 p.m. in the case. In your corner downtown, Mike Helgren, WJZ.
All right, thank you, Mike. Now,
the article says that he deserves due process just in the state of Texas, not Washington. Hey. You're crazy. You're crazy. Okay, stop. You're riling her up. Let me see an article on it. Let me read it. I might have misunderstood it. Yeah. The other court decision that came down is this one is actually tied to the El Salvadoran people that are sorry, the Venezuelan people. This decision, that's what I'm mistaking it with. The Supreme Court overturned the lower court's block on Venezuelan deportations. This one is a much larger victory for the Trump administration. This is the other one that is far worse. The Supreme Court on Monday allowed President Donald Trump to enforce the Alien Enemies Act, for now handing the White House a significant victory that will let the immigration officials rely on a sweeping wartime authority to rapidly deport alleged gang members. The unsigned decision in the case, the most closely watched emergency appeal pending at the Supreme Court, lets Trump invoke the 1798 law to speed removals while litigation over the act's use plays out in lower courts. The court stressed that people deported going forward should receive notice that they are subject to the act and an opportunity to have their removal reviewed. The court's 3 liberal justices dissented from the decision, and Justice Amy Coney Barrett, a member of the court's conservative wing, partially dissented. Trump framed his emergency appeal as a fight over judicial power, and specifically the U.S. District Judge James Boasberg's order that temporarily blocked the president from enforcing the Alien Enemies Act against 5 Venezuelans who sued, and a broader class of people who might be affected. In other words, anyone else. This is a path of perfect lawlessness. Court condemns Trump over wrongful deportation. Chief Justice John Roberts put a temporary stay on a lower court order requiring the Trump administration to return a wrongfully deported Salvadoran immigrant to the U.S. by midnight Monday. Roberts' stay came hours after a 3-judge panel for the 4th U.S. Circuit District Court of Appeals unanimously rejected the Trump administration's request to overturn it. And then it went up to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court's administrative stay gives justices additional time to rule on the dispute. The United States government has no legal authority to snatch a person who is unlawfully present in the United States off the street and remove him from the country without due process, the court ruled. The government's contention otherwise, and its argument that the federal courts are powerless to intervene, are unconscionable. It is an administrative stay, as in they will have they will overlook the case. But considering this is how they ruled in favor, like they blocked the lower court, they overturned the lower court's block on Venezuelan deportations. The circuit court ruled that, not Supreme Court, is confusing in this article. Wait, what am I not understanding? President Donald Trump last month invoked the Alien Enemies Act. The U.S. government claimed that those deported members are Tren-de-Aragua. This is 2 separate court cases. This is, okay, 2 separate court cases in front of us. Okay, 2 separate decisions. One is Judge Boasberg, I think I'm saying his name right, that said you are not allowed to deport these 5 Venezuelans without due process. The Trump administration says, sucks to suck, we already deported them. Okay? The Supreme Court looked at that decision and overturned the lower court's block on the deportations and said, you can deport these people. This one, on the other hand, also, why are people saying call Alex? Alex is not a fucking constitutional law scholar. Okay? God damn, you guys are so fucking stupid. Yeah, I am mad because you're dumb. Jesus Christ. Like, yeah, I'm mad. He's a fucking adult that does his own things. Like, he's not, on my whims. I can't just like be like, hey, I'm gonna call you up. Hey, come on the stream right now. No, I'm not saying I'm the expert, you fucking dumbass. Shut up. Of course he knows a significant amount more than me. I'm saying I can't just randomly call him up. Why not? Okay. All right. I'm dishing out week-long bans. Let's continue. I'm so fucking tired. Why does any of this matter, though? If they send him to a sovereign nation, what power do they have to force them to hand over someone they willingly took into their prison? What do you mean? First of all, we're talking about America versus El Salvador. America has all the power in the world against El Salvador, considering that America is paying El Salvador to even house these people. But even if they weren't paying El Salvador, we could just say, hey, give us this person back. And El Salvador would be like, oh, of course. As a matter of fact, that is precisely what has happened in the past. People have been wrongfully deported from this country after they were found in a court to be eligible for deportation. And then they've successfully sued the government. And the government realized that they erroneously sent someone overseas, sent them or deported them, and have actually brought back those people to U.S. soil. It happens. This is the first instance where it's not happening. If the Trump admin doesn't want to take them back, though, they clearly don't care about the courts anyway. I know, but what do you want me to do? Not cover the story and not talk about how fucking insane this is? Like, okay, well, the Trump administration clearly doesn't care about the courts, so there's no reason to talk about the Supreme Court also in an effort to, I guess, maintain the strength of the institutions, is voluntarily deciding on behalf of the administration so that there isn't a constitutional crisis if the Trump administration doesn't follow through on the Supreme Court decision. Oh, did the Supreme Court just ignore the Constitution and federal law in order to help their own political faction? Who could have predicted this? Left-wing legal scholars. Abrego Garcia, Maryland resident working as a sheet metal apprentice, his wife and a 5-year-old child who are both U.S. citizens. He has never even been charged with a crime in the U.S., El Salvador, or any other country. ICE arrested him on March 12th. The Trump administration has repeatedly alleged without showing proof either in public or in the courts that he has ties to MS-13. A federal judge ordered the government last week to overturn Abrego Garcia to the U.S. by midnight Monday. The Trump admin mocked the court's order, claiming it couldn't return him and that the judge had no authority over his return, to order his return. It asked the Fourth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals to overturn the ruling. The federal appeals panel said it denied the Trump administration's order, in part because its actions have most assuredly violated the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution. The government can and does return wrongfully removed migrants as a matter of course, the court said. Requiring the government to do so here is nothing less than exercising our duty to uphold the separation of powers. Before the Fourth, which is, again, 100% correct, okay? The Fourth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals made the right decision following the separation of powers and following the pre-existing rules on this matter. This is what has happened historically when someone has been deported, someone has been falsely deported from the United States of America. The American government goes and returns them. There's never been a reason to defy this process. The Trump administration chose to defy the process, and the Fourth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals also was asked to basically stop the demand being made from the lower court, and it went all the way up to the Supreme Court. Before the Fourth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals issued his ruling on Monday, the Trump administration appealed it to the Supreme Court. In the government's application to SCOTUS, Solicitor General Dean Sauer claimed that the U.S. should not have to return Abrego Garcia because he's a verified member of MS-13. No evidence whatsoever for this. As a matter of fact, only evidence to suggest he is not a member of MS-13. Remember, because he already has a withholding. The Fourth U.S. Circuit panel noted that the Department of Justice presented no evidence that Abrego Garcia was a member of the gang. It also noted that Abrego Garcia was accused of being a member of the gang's arm in New York, where he has never lived. They do a dragnet on Home Depot a couple of years ago, where one of the dudes falsely claims that Abrego Garcia is an MS-13 member from New York. Abrego Garcia has never been in New York. He's never been in New York. So it's just completely made up, which is precisely a court in the past overthrew that that initial charge and offered him a withholding. The reason why they offered him a withholding, as we look through the court, the court case that decided to give him a withholding, was because he was being threatened by MS-13 because of his family's like food stands. Him and his family were being threatened by MS-13, as in he should not be removed from the country, and especially not to El Salvador, because he is directly, according to the American justice system, the American justice system has established that his life would be in danger if he was sent back to El Salvador. There's no question the government screwed up here, Circuit Judge Harvey Wilkinson, who was appointed by the former President Ronald Reagan, wrote. The withholding of removal order was country-specific. It banned the government from removing Abrego to El Salvador and El Salvador only. Wilkinson said, granting the Trump admin's request would create a loophole through which it could whisk individuals to foreign prisons in violation of court orders and then contend, invoking its Article 2 powers, that it is no longer their custodian and there is nothing that can be done. It takes no small amount of imagination to understand that it is a path of perfect lawlessness, one that courts cannot condone, Wilkinson said. Do you understand? The El Salvador part of this process is even scarier than fucking Guantanamo Bay, because Guantanamo Bay is still, it's not on U.S. soil, so they can violate your laws or violate your habeas corpus and numerous other human rights laws. But because Guantanamo Bay is still managed by the American military, your lawyer can go there, your lawyer can talk to you, you can still you can still leave Guantanamo Bay. If the Trump administration just simply claims, once we deport you, it's over, it's even worse than Guantanamo Bay in the sense that now you're being sent to El Salvador, and the Trump administration is falsely claiming that they cannot extract these people back. They cannot bring these people back. This is insane. It is completely and utterly fucking insane. And the other decision is that the lower court had put a stay on the deportations of some of these Venezuelans that were sent to El Salvador. And the Trump administration asked the justice to weigh in after a federal judge paused the president's use of a wartime power law to deport Venezuelans accused of being gang members. And the Supreme Court ruled on Monday night that the Trump administration could continue to deport Venezuelan migrants based on a Wartime Powers Act for now, overturning a lower court that had put a temporary stop to the deportations. This is a major victory for the Nazi regime, a major victory for the fascists. It is the court system just basically shredding what remains of the separation of powers and what remains of their interest in following the letter of the law. It means that they are caving. It means that they're showing their bellies, or rather, they had all this appetite for this violence to begin with, and they're following through on this agenda. If they can do this, by the way, paired up with the other decision, they can basically do this for anybody with no interest in returning them either. American citizens. Remember, Donald Trump has said he wants to do this to American citizens as well. And now that we are maintaining that, like, once the person is out of our hands and in El Salvador, there's not anything that we can do, you can do that to an American citizen and basically make them not a citizen anymore. Make them a slave to the CCOT facility. The decision marks a victory for the Trump administration, although the ruling is narrow and focused on the proper venue for the cases, rather than on the administration's use of a centuries-old law to justify its decision to send plane loads of Venezuelans to El Salvador with little to no due process. This is cope. Okay? The narrow framework doesn't mean anything because they will serially keep violating it, and some judges will continue trying to stop this process and slowly but surely consistently give the administration everything it wants, because this is a major violation, and the Supreme Court basically overturned it. The Supreme Court took away the power of the courts. The justices did not address the question of whether the Trump administration improperly categorized the Venezuelans as deportable under the Alien Enemies Act, finding the migrants had improperly challenged their deportations in Washington, D.C. The justices determined that the migrants should have raised the challenges in Texas where they were being held. It's just like such a fucking cowardly, annoying, process-focused way to, one, simultaneously save face, while two, allowing this administration to continue its deportation agenda. And the reason why they did that was because they did not want there to be a potential constitutional crisis. The detainees are confined in Texas, so venue is improper in the District of Columbia, according to the court's order, which was brief and unsigned, as is typical in such emergency applications. In a concurrence, Justice Brett Kavanaugh stressed that the justices were in agreement that the migrants should receive judicial review, but that they were divided over where the case should be heard. As the court stresses, the court's disagreement with the dissenters is not over whether the detainees receive judicial review for their transfers. All 9 members of the court agree that judicial review is available. The only question is where that judicial review should occur. They did this thing in the most cowardly way possible, where they wanted to come across like they are, because if they had supported the lower court's decision here, as is what was expected, right? Under normal circumstances, they should have. Then the Trump administration would find themselves in this constitutional crisis where they had to fucking admit that they made a mistake and go back and extract these people and put them through due process, in which you would most likely find out that they didn't even have any criminal charges. Maybe one of them only had criminal charges and was deportable, but the other ones weren't. You know what I mean? It would be a long, convoluted, drawn-out process that would make the administration look bad. There'd be media coverage on it. There'd be a lot of back and forth where the messaging would absolutely hammer these guys. It would put the fucking dangerous immigration agenda in the forefront of people's consciousness. So instead of allowing that to happen, the Supreme Court found a cowardly way. The Supreme Court found a cowardly way to say, we don't want to have a constitutional crisis here, and we don't want to embarrass the administration. So we're just going to find a process-centered way of just saying the lower court that gave this decision has no power over it. Okay? The institutionalists on the court just want this to run to the Fifth Circuit where they were being held, which ICE moved to have a better ruling. That fits the precedent on immigration issues as well. No, I'm saying that in and of itself is quite literally a way to pass the buck down and to ensure that they get out of this, they concede to the Trump agenda on deportations without triggering a constitutional crisis. That's what I'm saying. Texas courts or Louisiana courts. There's a reason why ICE rapidly will ship people after blackbagging them to fucking Louisiana, because they know that the judges in Louisiana have this long, arduous process where they will either keep someone in detention for as long as they can, which is another way to torture these people, or expeditiously ship them out of the country and sign off on a deportation when most other judges would not. Problem here is that this was a federal immigration judge that intervened in the process and issued a court order, and the Trump administration refused to follow the court order. So the Supreme Court either was going to say, yeah, you have to listen to a fucking federal judge on immigration when they give you a court order, and then embarrass the Trump administration or even undermine their mass deportation agenda, or they could find a process-focused way to move, a process-focused way in which they're not saying like judicial review is gone, okay? But simply you did the wrong, like this judge didn't have power over this. Only the state where they were held, do the federal judges have power over it. The administration has asked the justice to weigh in on its effort to use the Alien Enemies Act to deport more than 100 Venezuelans to a prison in El Salvador. The administration claims the migrants are all members of Tren de Agua, a violent street gang rooted in Venezuela, and that their removals are allowed under the act, which grants the president authority to detain or deport citizens of enemy nations. The president may invoke the law in times of declared war or when a foreign government invades the United States. I want to mention something here. Nazis in the United States of America during World War II did not have their due process violated. In the Nuremberg trials, did not have their due process violated. Nazis during the Nuremberg trials deliberately were put through, and remember the documentary that we watched, not a mock trial in the same way that Stalin was engaging in, but instead a real liberal-ass fucking court where their death sentences were dished out after due process went through, after they went through the entire fucking court proceedings. So this means that random fucking gay Venezuelan barbers that are being called Tren de Agua, which is now considered a terror group, are unironically getting processed and deported and have a worse go in front of the law in 2025 than the fucking Nazis did in both Nuremberg and also prior to Nuremberg in the United States of America during World War II. That is crazy. And if anyone has no due process, that means no one has due process. Without due process, you have no way to maintain your innocence, which means without due process, if they can do this to people unjustifiably because they're, Venezuelan and previously on temporary protected status, under simply the suspicion that they are brown and can be called Tren de Agua, you can be called Tren de Agua as well. There's no due process, so it doesn't fucking matter. When there's no due process, that means anyone and everyone can be considered a Tren de Agua terrorist that can be expeditiously shipped out to a fucking slave labor camp without the government's, without any sort of extraction in the aftermath if we find out that we deported the wrong guy. Do you understand why these two court decisions play hand in hand and create an incredibly dangerous scenario for every American? So when you say this can't happen to me, understand that it very well can happen to you. No one is safe. This is the bright spot in a decision that, while not endorsing Trump's overreach, lets it play out for now, but it's a toothless argument. The Trump admin will either ignore it or give people 24 hours to have a chance to file a lawsuit, even if they don't have lawyers. Yeah. The Supreme Court effectively says this position by Stephen Miller is wrong. Detainees subject to removal orders under the AEA are entitled an opportunity to challenge their removal. The only question is which court will resolve that challenge. Thanks to today's decisions, there will be many more cases like this, requiring people to file individual habeas lawsuits in Texas that are appealed to the Fifth Circuit will simply not be possible for everyone to do. So people will again be illegally sent to El Salvador. So functionally, nothing changes, and worse, they actually basically give the legal background to the administration to do this kind of thing expeditiously. Do you understand? That's why I'm saying that they, in the most cowardly way possible, came down with these two decisions that allow them to fucking rip anyone they want out of their homes or in the street without any fucking due process whatsoever. And eventually this is going to happen to an American citizen. I promise you. Right now, the furthest they've gone is a green card recipient. That was the high profile case of Mahmoud Khalil, unjustifiably removed. There's a separate legal standard for that, which is, again, in dispute right now. Does Marco Rubio, as the Secretary of State, have the unilateral power to decide without any fucking evidence whatsoever that a person is a risk to American national security and interests? Does he have the power to do this without showing his work? That is going to be another major Supreme Court case. But in terms of these mass deportations that have been taking place, now the Supreme Court is basically, in the most cowardly way, stating that they're going to play ball with the administration. Can they do this to tourists, you ask? They can do this to every single person, not just tourists. They can do this to American citizens as well, because once again, I'm going to stress this important thing. If someone doesn't have due process, then no one is a citizen. The idea that if non-citizens don't have due process, then no one has due process, because your citizenship status is not a matter of evidence, but instead your citizenship status is in the hands of the person detaining you. They are the judge, jury, and executioner in this process. Do you understand? No, not is wrong. Shut the fuck up. Stop doing this dumb shit, okay? Don't do this fucking thing. No, not unless you're cis white American. No, even then, okay? Even then. Yes, cis white American men will probably be the last on the deportation list. You're right about that, but that doesn't mean that they're not on the deportation list. I will stress the importance of this. Please, fucking understand something. It does not matter. It doesn't matter. They can do this to anyone they want to. It's a matter of time. It's not if, it's when, okay? It's a matter of when. How are people not understanding what I'm saying here? It's not because these guys are brown. Them being brown makes it more palatable and in line with the white nativist anti-immigrant agenda of this administration. But that's just opening up the door. Just like this administration doesn't give a fuck about anti-Semitism, they're just using the institutional appetite of Jewish advocacy groups that are actually pro-Israel advocacy groups to use their institutional muscle and their institutional power to enforce a dangerous agenda that violates the First Amendment. It is just a boundary-breaking, precedent-setting initiative. The goal is not simply to do this to brown people. The goal is to do it to everybody they want to do this to. They decide that you violated, you are a domestic terrorist because you fucking farted on a Tesla. You're a white guy. You're out. You're out. It's only a matter of time, okay? Maybe it's because my name is Hasan and I live in the United States of America in a post 9/11 world that I'm terrified of what is going on, because I've seen this already happen. I've seen how we got here, and many Americans were just, they had their fucking horse blinders on and they were oblivious to it. But if you think that this is not a serious escalation from the standard that was set in the post 9/11 world, I don't know what to tell you. This is how it happens. This could not have happened right now without the war on terror, without the surveillance state greatly expanding in the aftermath of 9/11. And this could not have happened if Democratic administrations severely rolled back these violations of civil liberties, but they didn't do that. Every administration expands upon or normalizes the previous administration's dangerous agenda. And we finally arrive at an administration that has the initiative, that has the interest of following through this incredible surveillance state and its deportation mechanisms to its logical conclusion. If you think being white or being straight is going to stop you, if you think that like some ICE guy is going to be nicer to you because you're a fucking white guy, you're delusional, okay? No one is safe. You're literally operating on, you're doing the fucking first they came for the communist poem. You're Neum, whatever the fuck his name is, the German Lutheran priest. You're unironically in the post World War II era doing the same thing. You're Nemoler. You're being a Nemoler. What the fuck? Tonight, we learned that it was indeed Andre, the gay man sent to El Salvador because his mom and dad tattoos, who an American journalist saw sobbing as guards slapped him repeatedly. He's an innocent. And Trump sent him to a torture prison, bring him back. This was the reason why he was considered El Salvador. A gay hairstylist and makeup artist. If they could do this to Andy, an innocent man who did nothing wrong, he came to a port of entry seeking asylum. Think what else they could do. He never saw a judge. They just threw him on a plane without even telling him where he was going. This is why due process matters. Andrea entered the U.S. legally at a port of entry to seek asylum after registering with the Customs and Border Patrol and waiting in Mexico for an appointment. But even if he had entered illegally, it would not justify being sold to a prison in El Salvador with no due process. If you hyper-focus on this dude's tattoos, you're also fucking stupid. It's not because he has tattoos. It's not because he's Venezuelan. It's because this administration wants to do this, and they know that this is the weakest link. They're recognizing the appetite that the broad majorities in American public have for the time being for enacting this dangerous deportation agenda, this white nativist immigration agenda. That's why they're starting with people that they're claiming falsely is Tren de Aragua. She knows perfectly well that the guy with the autism awareness tattoo and the gay hairdresser are not heinous, violent foreign terrorists. Not sure how these people sleep at night, and they proudly call themselves Christians too. Yeah. This is how the administration is defending the Supreme Court decision right now, by the way.
This is a legal victory, Jesse, a massive victory for law and order and for our constitutional republic and the sovereignty of the United States of America. We called on the Supreme Court to rein in these activist judges like Judge Boasberg, who was completely out of line in trying to say that the president didn't have the executive authority to deport foreign terrorists off of our soil. We have always maintained the position at the White House that the president was well within his constitutional authority to do so. And this decision proves that President Trump and our administration have always...
Yeah, the dumbass Supreme Court handed this major W to the fucking Trump administration, and process perverted liberals will still look at this and be like, well, the focus is narrow. No, this is why they did it. So that Caroline Leavitt can go on fucking Jesse Waters and be like, yeah, that's right, we will deport you, and there's nothing you can do about it. And also, lo and behold, turns out even if we deport you falsely, okay, and you had a previous order to be here, whether you were an American citizen or you had a withholding, for example, we can violate that. We can violate that. We won't even take you back. Because guess what? Once it's out of our hands, it's out of our hands as a sovereign nation. How can people not understand this? It's fucking insane.
It's been right from the beginning. He will continue to utilize the Alien Enemies Act to remove foreign terrorists and Tren de Aragua members, vicious gang members from...
They're not. They're not fucking Tren de Aragua.
American communities. And because of this ruling, the United States of America is a much safer place. Our team...
It's not. It's the exact opposite. It is a less safe place. On March 14th, President Trump signed a proclamation that targeted members of Tren de Aragua. We already covered this. The same day, plane loads of deportees were sent to El Salvador, which entered an agreement with the Trump administration to take Venezuelans and detain them. A federal judge, James E. Boasberg, directed the administration to stop the flights. He subsequently issued a written order temporarily pausing the administration's plan while the court cases proceeded. The Trump administration appealed Judge Boasberg's temporary restraining order, and a divided panel of 3 appellate court judges in Washington sided with the migrants, keeping the pause in place. One judge wrote that the government's deportation plan had denied the Venezuelans an even gossamer thread of due process, which it did. At that point, the Trump admin asked the Supreme Court to weigh in, arguing in its application that the case presented fundamental questions about who decides how to conduct sensitive national security-related operations in this country. Lawyers for the migrants responded sharply, arguing that the temporary pause by Judge Boasberg was the only thing standing in the way of the government sending migrants to a prison in El Salvador, perhaps never ever to be seen again without any kind of procedural protection, much less judicial review. The ACLU and Democracy Forward, groups representing the Venezuelan migrants, said that the president had bent the law in an effort to shoehorn a criminal gang into a wartime law manner in a manner that was completely at odds with the limited delegation of wartime authority Congress chose to give him through the statute. Lawyers for the migrants said the migrants sent to El Salvador have been confined incommunicado in one of the most brutal prisons of the world, where torture and other human rights abuses are rampant. Why El Salvador? Because El Salvador is a nation that we can easily dominate, okay? It's run by fucking an autocratic monster by the name of Nayib Bukele, who, one, may or may not have also been dealing with MS-13 or cut separate deals with MS-13 gangs, leaders of MS-13, which, by the way, had their fucking court date in the United States of America, and our administration actually sent them to Nayib Bukele so that they couldn't snitch on Nayib Bukele about their dealings with Nayib Bukele, but that's a totally separate domestic issue for him. But the reason why we're doing this is because for $6 million, this guy who also personally may or may not have cut a side deal with MS-13 gets to process and warehouse people that are law-abiding on U.S. soil, sometimes legal permanent residents, and maybe even fucking citizens for the low price of $6 million a year. They get to do slave labor in a slave labor camp with no fucking rights whatsoever. Source on that for the president of El Salvador. Secret Bukele deal lies behind Trump's El Salvador deportations. U.S. President Donald Trump of Salvador and President Nayib Bukele have long presented themselves as crusaders of justice. The narrative hit a cinematic apogee earlier this month when Trump swept up a clutch of Venezuelans, he said, were hardened gangsters, paired them up with some alleged members of MS-13 and sent them down south to be detained in Bukele's terrorism prison. The truth turns out to be much messier. Not only did Trump deport Venezuelans who were likely completely innocent, but also specific MS-13 members who was emblematic of alleged corruption at the highest ranks of the Salvadoran government, a man called Grenas. The importance of Grenas, whose legal name is Cesar Humberto Lopez Larios, lies in what he knows. According to a federal indictment, as the leader of MS-13, Grenas was involved in negotiations between the gang and Bukele's government, aimed at lowering gang violence in exchange for political support. Bukele denies the negotiations ever took place, but has long sought to get a hold of high-ranking members of MS-13